see. If you can pull up the stream on yours too and make sure that thing we talked about last time, make sure it's working good and stuff.
Twitch.tv/the Canon Cantina.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me go turn on my other computer, my other laptop. It's just right over there.
Okay.
I'll pull it up.
This is good. All right. Hey guys. About to go live. With the show. We're live now. Just waiting on everybody. Just to get in here.
Well, we got one viewer.
Oh yeah.
My other laptop.
You're funny. It's exciting. People are jumping on. You posted, right? So I'll just give people time to catch up, you know? That's basically...
While the thunder beat the jazz.
Yeah. Did that show up on our Facebook?
I put it on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah. Okay. Check, check.
Check, 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 check.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Mark Hamill, Mark Hamill. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Got your.
Oh,
You
wait.
count
Hold
me
on.
off.
Get those within reach. All right, I'm at the start of the playhead. That track's muted. That track's muted. Okay, I'm ready. You ready to record?
Mm-hmm.
Click record in 3, 2, 1. Click.
People gotta love this behind the scenes.
Well, yeah.
Starting music and 3, 2, 1. Sweet. Welcome to the Canon Cantina, a Star Wars show where we try to answer the question, who is Luke Skywalker? Or who is Mark Hamill? Or who is Jake Skywalker? That's today's episode, that's right.
Oh, Lord.
And before the release of Star Wars Episode 9, my name is Jesse, and I am joined with my co-host and Star Wars best friend, as always, Mike. How's it going today, buddy?
I'll tell you who Luke Skywalker is. He's a bum. Or maybe it's that Mark Hamill guy, or maybe it's that Jake Skywalker guy, but he's a bum.
A bum?
No, not really. But we were talking before we started recording, which we're supposed to be talking about the 1995 Legends novel Children of the Jedi tonight. And we were like, you know what? We didn't quite get through that. Well, we could be honest with them. We're on like a novel a week schedule. That's a lot. We didn't quite get through it to the point where we thought it would be, you know, a quality episode, which the translation of that is that Jesse was not going to be able to carry me through a Legends episode like he always has to. So we thought we would take something that we thought we were going to do as a Patreon exclusive episode talking about Mark Hamill running his mouth again and just put it on the regular show for everybody.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. Mark.
Hey!
Mike.
Is he on the other end of the line and we just don't know he's there?
I hope he is. I would, man. In my dreams. But yeah, so it was a series of events, Mike, that made today's episode kind of interesting. All this Mark news happened, and we definitely thought it was worth talking about more than just like 5 minutes on the show. And, you know, Children of the Jedi is a hefty, flowery book that is not super enjoyable to read, but we want to give you a good representation of the text.
That's a good preview.
We want to give you a good representation of the text, so we want to get that episode just right for next week.
That's why you come here, so you don't have to read those hefty, flowery, unenjoyable books.
Yeah, so that's just a teaser for next week. That's a tease. But, you know, today we got
Nice.
the exciting discussion about Mark. But before we get into that, Mike, okay, now it's getting real. Now we're like 30 days or less till Star Wars Celebration. As in, you and I will be there.
Now it's real.
You and I will be there less than 30 days from now, and that's what's happening. So if you've lived under a rock for some time, or you just jumped on our show for the first time, Star Wars Celebration is going to be April 11th through April 15th. And Mike and I have the pleasure of getting to go, but not only getting to go, we get to do this show. I almost said like our show, but this show we're doing right now, we get to do this live. Hopefully talk about Star Wars Celebration. And
that's right. The most important day of Star Wars Celebration is Saturday the 13th at 2 p.m. at the podcast stage, because that's when the Canon Cantina will be live. please come see us. We would really appreciate it.
Yeah. So that's actually our live day, guys. We are doing the show on the podcast stage, and I think that's a pretty good time slot, Mike. There's gonna be a lot going on, and Saturday, I'm happy with that day. I was afraid we were going to get one of the last days, and you and I were going to be hoarse from just talking to hundreds of people and crying and screaming, whatever had happened. My voice was going to be gone. I'm confident of that. So Saturday, I think it'll work. I think it'll work.
Oh yeah, and every podcast that's on the podcast stage is great. Like, we recognize that we are like the new kid on the block on the stage, because I've listened to so many of these shows for years now, and we're sharing the stage with a lot of great people, and specifically the lineup on Saturday is banging.
Yeah.
We are right in the middle of it, but just if you feel like spending all day in the podcast stage area, you're going to see some great stuff.
Yeah, so just a couple of the other shows going on Saturday, the same day as us, is Unmistakably Star Wars, The Force Cast, Inside the Force, the Canon Cantina. I said it again.
That's us.
The Canon Cantina. We're just going down the list here. Fangirls Going Rogue, the Resistance Broadcast, the Cantina Cast. There's a lot of shows on that day.
One more Faux-Authentic History.
Yes.
But that's everybody. We are like right in between Faux-Authentic History and the Force Cast, which is mind-blowing to me.
I'm excited. And it's going to be good, Mike. It's going to be good. We've got a lot of things to do still between now and then. And what's funny is, like, just Star Wars Celebration alone, we would be busy, I would say, preparing. And there's so much we want to see and do, but doing the live show is an honor and a privilege, and we're gonna make it count, Mike. We're gonna it's happening.
Yeah, one way or another, it's happening.
I knew that was coming. Yeah, so
I promise to do my best not to just stand up there in front of everybody and say, so thank you all for coming to the Canon Cantina. I'm so nervous talking to... it's a big room, so help us fill it up, please.
Yeah, so write that down on your calendar. Saturday at 2 p.m. I look at it and make sure I'm saying it right, Mike, as Saturday at 2 p.m.
You are.
And that's Saturday, April 13th. So mark your calendar. We will mention this again before that date comes, but we only have a couple episodes.
We'll mention it every week until it happens.
Yeah, there's only probably a couple episodes till then, Mike. So we just wanted to actually get to announce it here. We finally got permission to announce it to you guys, and you guys are the first to hear it like you should be, and we're excited. And we're going to be streaming it on, hopefully on here, if not on here, somewhere else. We will provide the links on the day of.
If we're not streaming it, we're going to have it just up as soon as we can after it's recorded.
Absolutely.
A lot of that just depends on the type of signal we get in the building and stuff like that. Things that we can't really plan ahead for.
Yep. Tech stuff is tech stuff, so we're going to figure it out best we can, and roll the dice sometimes with tech. That's how it is. But and the least, we're going to perform at Celebration. You can see us there, and we're also going to record the audio and put it on the podcast feed for anyone that's not going to Star Wars Celebration, and they also can't watch us on the stream. They will get to listen to the show here on your podcast feed. So either way, we're going to have you covered. And speaking of having you covered, Mike and I are going to flood social media and our Patreon and things like that with all sorts of extra content, probably even some extra podcast episodes that we'll release further down the line, things like that, with goodies. I'm hoping some discussions, some just fun things that Mike and I might do in Chicago. Who knows? There's a lot.
He always makes these promises to you while we're live without asking me first, but that's fine. We're going to do all those things for you. We can't wait.
More free content for you guys, I'm hoping. So more entertainment, hopefully, for you. Make those commutes a little easier, and you get to kind of live out the Star Wars Celebration lifestyle without some of the hassle.
Lifestyle.
It is a lifestyle, as you know, Mike. We were talking about this.
Start training. Hopefully you'll get to see all of our pictures and videos and not encounter half of the smells that we do.
You won't be standing in lines for hours and hours and hours. You can just watch us Instagram on our stories and stuff, standing in lines for hours and hours, things like that. But you will miss out on some good beer and coffee and stuff, which will be, of course, keeping us sustained throughout the day. So
gotta alternate, regulate.
Mm-hmm. Coffee, beer, water, just keep those things going. Stay on your feet.
Anyway, so yeah, you can tell this was going to be a Patreon exclusive episode by how loose we're flying with things.
I love it.
So a few days ago, Mark Hamill did an interview with the website Den of Geek, which they break a lot of great stories. I've read a lot of stuff from them. This interview was specifically about Mark's role in season 2 of the show Nightfall, like Knight Fall, which I haven't watched. Looks interesting, sort of a Vikings-ish show.
Right. I've seen Mark's pictures from that,
but
they look awesome.
Yeah, and he looks like crazy in it. He's got all sorts of like makeup and hair extensions and like fake scars and stuff.
Looks like Dark Side Merlin to me, and that.
Yeah, kinda. But as you all know, poor Mark can't do anything without getting asked about Star Wars. And he didn't have his handler or publicist or whoever with him. And he just got to spout off again. Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's a good hook to start us off.
There's a big interview over at Den of Geek. And I don't want to read the whole thing, but there are some specific quotes that we want to address in this episode. Let's see. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but Hamill's complicated feelings regarding the fate of the character, which he's most associated with, have hit the headlines since the release of The Last Jedi in December 2017. The thing is, Luke changed so much between the first trilogy and the last trilogy. I got myself into trouble. And he talked about how, things he would say on social media would get cherry picked and sort of used against him. He ends up with saying, they take selective comments you've made, use it out of context to support their argument. Say, hey, see, Mark hated Star Wars. And he's like, did I? But as a fan, Mark gets it. He says he was once describing Star Wars fans, and he said they're passionate, they're opinionated, and they feel a sense of ownership because they've invested so much time in these characters and stories. And then he realized he was describing himself. Excuse me. So all of that is fine, up to this point.
I think that's a pretty good
really
quote
in this interview.
Star Wars fans too, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not it's right or wrong. That's a nice general sweeping notion of Star Wars, because I think what's different about Star Wars from other cultural phenomenons, but we've talked about this a lot, especially with story-driven franchises and things like that. Like, people already have a sense of ownership just if they grew up with it. But then you add the brevity and width of Star Wars on top of that. I mean, Star Wars is kind of the Coca-Cola of the movie world. And people having, family traditions and passed down and things like that. Mike and I have told our family traditions and experiences we've had with our families with Star Wars on the show. That's a pretty good descriptor. And of course, we're passionate. We're creating a podcast,
right.
every week.
Yeah. But none of that is approaching the things that Mark was saying pre The Last Jedi, where they may as well call me Jake Skywalker. All of that was still, above board. I'm sure Disney didn't really mind saying. But then he starts to say some things that might go against the grain. Okay. Mark remains shocked by Han Solo's fate, slain by Kylo Ren, also Ben Solo. He says, I just thought Luke's never going to see his best friend again. And you look at it in a self-centered way. And he thought it was a big mistake that the big three, himself, Harrison, and Carrie, would never reunite on screen. But then to do my best Mark,
right? Mike, this is something
he has, but he's reiterating it here. But to do my best Mark impression, I guess I was wrong because nobody seems to care.
It's true. I like that.
That wasn't
quote.
too bad.
That's not too bad.
Luke, Han, and Leia will never be together again, and I'll probably never get to work with Harrison again. That's another quote that we're going to revisit here in a little bit. He thought they should have pushed his death off to the last one, which is another sticking point or whatever. And then he basically says, I feel like I got one movie. They totally hornswoggled, which great use of the word
Yeah.
hornswoggled. He's in at the end of 7, killed off in 8. We don't know what kind of role he's going to play in 9, but it could just be a small part.
Yeah.
He feels like he got tricked into doing one movie. But he does end this interview by saying, listen, I never expected to come back. We had a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's what I said. Why mess with it? It's not something that worries me because it's all about the new generation as it should be. And that's sort of where they wrapped up talking about Star Wars.
Okay.
But the reason we're talking about this is it made headlines everywhere. Everybody's like, oh, hey, Mark Hamill hates Star Wars again. He went back on all the nice things he said about Last Jedi and hates it again. So before we go any farther, do you have any response to like the last half of that?
The last half. Well, I got a response to the first part of that, Mike, but I've said this before.
Yeah,
I've
sure.
said this before. This is something you've told me several times that I'm wrong on, but I think I'm right. I agree completely with Mark with honestly, my biggest Luke regret, I suppose, if we have to use that word, is the one that Mark mentions at the beginning of this, that we don't get to see Han, Luke, and Leia together, all three. That's my biggest thing. That's my biggest.
I don't know that I've ever flat out said you're wrong about that, because I agree that's a great feel good moment. And listeners, if I have said he's wrong, you're probably right.
Him and Leia, right? Just the two of them. You know what I mean? Look how good the moment was.
But are we making good Star Wars movies, or are we doing fan service?
That's not fan service. That's the three main characters of the last trilogy having a final moment. That's fine. That's good. I don't think that's fan service.
They had their final moment at the end of Return of the Jedi.
The hug.
As we're going to talk about, they are not the main characters in this story anymore.
Obviously, yeah. We know that. It's just something I've said was a huge problem with me with even The Last Jedi was like that 5-second shot of Mark grieving Han was cut from the movie, and this is the longest Star Wars movie we've ever had. That was obviously a mistake. We could have cut 10 seconds from Canto Bight and put 10 seconds of Mark grieving Han. That would have still been better. See what I'm saying? Like, I think that's Mark's problem.
Oh, I'm not going to argue with that.
And that was a good performance. That right after Chewie busts down that door.
Yeah,
I don't know why they cut it off. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's where Mark's coming from. It's his.
We got to pause. I'll be right back.
Okay. You guys that are on the stream, we appreciate you being here. Sometimes children and dogs disrupt the stream. And that's just a fact of life. If anyone wants to talk in the chat, jump in the chat, and we will engage with the chat during this episode, because it's kind of a special episode, especially now as we're on a brief break as Mike comes back. This is pretty big stuff. So. Mm-hmm. Live long and prosper. That I like that. Polar nights. Hey, thanks for you guys that are jumping on. More people jumping on, which is awesome. We're on a brief break because Mike had to jump up real quick. You know, this is a good time for me to jump up and grab a water. So you guys keep talking in the chat. I'll be right back. The droid.
Ever since Luke disappeared, people have been looking for him.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
A lot of rumors, stories.
And I became a legend.
People that knew him best.
Luke. Young Skywalker. Luke.
It's all true.
I am a Jedi.
Streaming some
Like my father before me.
All of it.
I'm going to jump back on a little bit later. That would be awesome. I'm going to jump on the chat with you guys here on the iPad. If anyone's just joining the stream, Mike had to step away for a second. He should be right back. Okay. Waiting on the Padawan. I just saw that comment.
Ooh. Sorry about that. My wife got home from the store and she was like, "Oh, hey, I got this thing for the kid, and I need your help to get it in because she physically couldn't carry it in."
Oh, that's better. I thought it was something more ominous than that. Like
Oh, no.
the,
It was
the kid had
it's
escaped
like
bed or
help.
something, and you're like, oh no.
He's almost that big, but not
Yeah,
quite.
he's close. That's why I was like, as I said on the stream, the
That would
people
be
that
hilarious if I spent that whole time chasing him down.
a few people hung around, people have dropped off, so we'll see if they come back. But
We sorry about that.
do you remember where you were at?
We had just gone through his quotes and whatever. You were saying what you thought about. I was about to give a little bit of context before I started addressing his specific comments.
Yeah, after I said the big.
So, do you have anything else to say about it?
The big three. I'll jump back in here. But yeah, Mike, I think that like the 3 Han, Luke, and Leia thing was kind of a big part for me. I like that Mark touched on that again. And also that him talking about the cherry picking thing, I thought that was interesting. That kind of gives...
And it's true.
It's true. And that gives a lot of credence to like, which we're going to come up on in a bit, nuance within this whole discussion. Because you're saying like, people are like, either Mark's the worst or Mark hates Star Wars. Like there's no like... And he's even saying like, well, people take what I say out of context, even parts I didn't like or didn't like. I don't know if we've gotten to the musician part, but I really liked his quote on that.
I think I sort of went through it just because I was trying not to read the whole thing. But he basically said,
quote, yeah.
"I'm like a musician playing music," or
I try to play it to the best of my ability.
Making that analogy to being an actor.
Yeah, I play the music to the best of my ability. Doesn't mean I always like the tune, but that's not my job. That's the conductor's job.
Well, he acted his ass off in The Last Jedi because he was great in it. Yeah. But just to give a little bit more context to people who might not know. So before The Last Jedi came out, Mark had said some similar stuff, and he sounded pretty whiny. Saying things like, "Oh, I don't even recognize the character anymore. They may as well call me Jake Skywalker."
I love it.
Then around the time the movie was released, or maybe just after, Mark, I don't have the specific quotes in front of me because I didn't want to read like everything.
Well, I think Disney gave Mark a little slap on the hand because he was running pretty
and
free.
They could
he was
have
running pretty punk rock free for a while there, and then all of a sudden his tune changed pretty quickly.
Or he could have realized he was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think,
once he actually saw the movie.
I don't think he ever thought he was like, he never said that though. He always said like it's Ryan's vision.
I think he did though.
He said I don't agree.
No, I think after it came out, he did say I said some stuff I shouldn't have. Maybe not. I was wrong, but I said some things I shouldn't have. Ryan's movie is fantastic.
His opinion's still the same on Luke though, and I'm glad. Like, I don't know.
I don't think that's true. I think that his mind was changed when he saw it. But even if it is Disney slapping his hand, whatever. Yeah. The other context that's important is Mark Hamill has notoriously always had terrible ideas of what should happen to Luke Skywalker. He thought that going into Return of the Jedi, Luke should be a buff, like ripped badass with no shirt and like a giant earring. He thought that we should find Luke in The Force Awakens, where he'd had a family and basically lost them because a kid found a lightsaber and turned it on and accidentally killed himself, like a kid finding a gun that wasn't kept securely. Just really awful ideas for, movies.
For movies. I like that.
Compared to what we've gotten.
I never knew about the buff earring thing. Is that a...
Oh, yeah.
But I mean...
No, I swear I'm not making that up.
That sounds like an 80s movie, but...
Well, and I think he was thinking this stuff in the 80s. Yeah. I can't tell you the source right now just because I've read a whole lot of crap about this.
Now, I dove into this pretty deep, Mike, a long time ago when we did Dark Empire, and I remember Mark talking about they kind of like tying Dark Empire to Return of the Jedi. One of George's ideas early on was kind of a Dark Empire idea for one of the first things after the EU. And George kind of, I guess, planted the seed somewhere and someone ran with it. But Mark didn't like that idea either. of Luke turning to the dark side, and maybe even Luke turning to the dark side, Return of the Jedi, but then George kind of backtracked from that and stayed on the regular
Well,
path.
the original script of Return of the Jedi had Luke putting on Darth Vader's helmet, saying, now I am Vader, or whatever.
Right.
George Lucas has also notoriously had some terrible ideas for Star Wars, if you read what he wanted the sequel trilogy to be.
Well, but ideas are just ideas. You know what I mean? Like, until they're put down to paper or to actual art, like we're talking about these movies or something like that, right? Like,
and you're right,
so
but what I'm saying is it's a good thing. It's a good thing that Mark Hamill is not in charge of what happens to Luke Skywalker,
right.
Is my point.
Okay.
So I want to address a few of those specific comments. So the first one, Luke changed so much between the first trilogy and the last trilogy. Mm-hmm. Well, duh, 35 years went by. Of course someone is going to change. That's like Luke living, like he wasn't even 30 by the end of Return of the Jedi. He's lived, that much longer. And Legends, canon, whatever, gone on lots of adventures, learned a lot of things, as we're starting to find out as we go through the regular episodes of our show.
Right.
So of course he's going to be a different person. Now, it's okay to not agree with the person he's become, but to say he should stay the same as the person we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi is just silly, in my opinion. And that's one of the first things that we talked about on this show, really, because the reason we're doing this show is all this division over the character of Luke that sprung up after The Last Jedi. That's kind of what got us started, and we've sort of stuck to that.
Yeah, and like which parts are, valid, invalid, or does it even matter? You know what I mean? Like, can we have the canon Legends Lukes be different representations of the character, like Superman being written by so many different authors over the years and all the different Superman comics. That's the way to kind of look at it. That's kind of where I'm getting to with it. It's like, are those all Superman? Yes, but like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they're all clearly different, and Marvel's the same way with the Ultimate Universe and things like that. But it's still Spider-Man. So Star Wars is complicated because it's what I talked about earlier. It's like that all-encompassing, like, family Coca-Cola thing. Like it's always been there. It's always been there. You know what I mean? And that's why people have a harder time, I think, with this, especially with Luke, because he is the original hero.
Well, and building on that, the next quote I wanted to talk about, he said, fans are passionate, they're opinionated, and they feel a sense of ownership. Right. And that's true. Fans feel ownership, and what we're noticing is they're quick to jump to outrage when they're reminded that they don't actually have any ownership over these characters or stories. This was probably especially hard for Mark, but I feel like this was also specifically addressed in The Last Jedi when Luke says the Force doesn't belong to you.
Right. That's a little Ryan stab, is what you're saying. So,
well, yeah, that's one of the more pointed things, in the movie, but yeah, the Force doesn't belong to you or any one person, doesn't belong to Rian Johnson or Mark Hamill. It's bigger than all of us. And like you're saying, like Superman being written by so many different people, it's all still Superman. Right. You can just have favorite parts of it or whatever.
Yeah. It's just a hard conversation to have, I think, Mike. I think people look at it so binary, like we've talked about. Like they look at it like, well, you have to only love the Legends Luke, or you have to only love the canon Luke, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that sort of thing, where it's kind of the age we live in today is partially fueling it, which makes it worse. The way people talk online and things like that. But I think with it being Luke in particular, I think if it was any other character, this would be probably a less heated discussion, especially considering Han and Leia are the same. That's some devil's advocate stuff I got, because Han and Leia are basically the same. They're doing what they've always done.
What do you mean by
in the sequel trilogy? I mean,
I heard you saying Luke and Leia because they were like, yes, Han and Leia were extensions of their characters.
Right.
But
And Han even reverted.
I don't
Han
think
even
Luke is
reverted
that
back
different.
to what he, you know, what I mean, he kind of reverted to old Han a little bit at the beginning of Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Up to the Force Awakens and the beginning of it and things like that. What do you think about Luke?
And you're right. Han and Leia are not drastically different, but I don't really think that Luke is either. What's the last thing we saw him do with a lightsaber? Throw it away because he was done with it. Mm-hmm. Both of his masters ran and hid when they realized they were in a losing battle or they'd screwed something up. So I know that people don't like seeing something different than what they had envisioned in Luke, but I don't think he's that different than what we saw in the last movie either. He's maybe a little more different than Han and Leia, sure, but it's not like they completely did a 180 on the character.
Yeah, but I've always thought with the thing with Luke running away, I think, and you know, we obviously can return this conversation so many times in the future, but it's like Luke is Obi-Wan in this movie, which is cool, but I feel like he's Obi-Wan that ran away, but he's much more intense and jaded than Obi-Wan was. So maybe that's where people draw distinctions.
Well, it's because he's not Obi-Wan. He's Luke.
Right.
They're different people.
Right.
But
so the next thing
I'll
the lines more than he has, so that's what's kind of more interesting. Like Obi-Wan's kind of been, you know what I mean? Like Luke was more of the, as we've talked about, pure goods type guy, and Obi-Wan kind of like the snark, you know, all the Obi-Wan elements.
Snark and a little bit of pathological lying too.
Yeah, and arrogance.
I'm going to combine the next two. Luke's never going to see his best friend again, so you start to look at it in a self-centered way. And I'll probably never get to work with Harrison again, which, like, I agree. It is truly sad that Luke, Han, and Leia, or Mark, Harrison, and Carrie will never get a reunion on screen. It's sad, but that doesn't mean it's not okay. It's okay that the three of them won't be on screen again. It's also said that Mark may never work with Harrison again, but who knows? Mark's experiencing a bit of a career resurgence right now, showing up in shows like Nightfall, movies like Kingsman, and he's just another one that escapes me right now.
Right. After kind of not being in the live action setting in quite some time, just the voice acting realms.
Yeah. So I agree. It is sad that we don't get to see that, but that doesn't mean it's a missed opportunity because, like I said, there's a difference between fan service and telling a new story. Not saying that the three of them together is exclusively fan service, because sometimes fan service is good. We've gotten plenty of it in the sequel trilogy, but it doesn't have to exist just for the sake of that would be a good moment.
I think it was a huge misstep, but I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm at. It's
well, and that's where Mark's at too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in the similar spot as Mark. Yeah. So really the next question I'm going to lead into, Mike, is with Star Wars Episode 9 coming, like we might have to re-examine this entire conversation, of course. And we're going to deeply, hopefully, look at this on the show post Star Wars Episode 9 with obviously more Luke canonical content. Even if Luke doesn't play a big part in the new movie, I'm assuming we'll get some more information about him via the other characters in some way. So how is that going to change this discussion, or like Mark's outlook on this? Does it matter? What interests me about this conversation is this: Mark doesn't seem like angry here, but he seems very vocal and he seems very free. So what does that mean for Star Wars Episode 9? Does that mean that they said you can be vocal, you can be free? Or does that mean he might play a smaller role in the movie than we even thought? And he's just he's like, now that he knows us playing a small role in the movie, he's just kind of going wild. I mean, there's a lot of questions here.
Or there's the other side that this is all a coordinated marketing ploy by Disney, who saw what happened after 8, and they're like, you know what? You have a decent sized part in this movie, but let's use the fact that everything you say becomes, clickbait gold, basically, and let's troll everybody.
Now, when you say decent sized part, using Star Wars movies as reference, what would you deem a decent sized part? Mace Windu in Episode 2, or like Obi-Wan in New Hope? You know what I'm saying? Or some other character in between, like.
Maybe somewhere in between. Maybe not Mace Windu in episode
Not that
2
little.
amounts of screen time.
Some more
But
than that, you think?
you know,
Maybe
no
less.
less.
Okay.
Probably somewhere between that and Obi-Wan in Empire Strikes Back, because Obi-Wan was still pivotal and powerful in his limited screen time in Empire Strikes
Hopefully
Back.
Mark has more time than that, though. Yeah.
And I imagine he will. Yeah. But
Rey's gonna be starting
I think
up
it will
the
be
Starfighter, and Luke's gonna be like, wait, don't do it.
it'll be significantly more than a cameo, but I don't know if he'll have more than 20 minutes of screen time. Although I don't know if he had 20 minutes of screen time in The Last Jedi.
I think he probably did. I mean, maybe not actual verbal discussion or, but I don't know. He was kind of in the background with Rey a lot, things like that. I'm sure someone's done the math. He was in it quite a bit.
So he was. The next quote that I wanted to talk about is, they should have pushed my death off to the last one. Mm-hmm. And of all the gripes he's listed before the movies came out and this one, I can see this one maybe being something that Disney wishes they could take back. I would love to read the original script for Colin Trevorrow's movie that was supposed to be Leia-centric. Okay. Well, that way we would see just how Carrie's unfortunate passing forced a change in direction for episode 9. Because I don't remember which Disney bigwig said it, but it was one of the bigwigs. Might have been JJ, Ryan, Colin, maybe Kathleen Kennedy. 7 was Han, 8 was Luke, 9 was Leia. That was their original plan. And obviously that had to change when Carrie died before episode 8 came out. I think that played a big role in why Colin Trevorrow was let go. In addition to the Jurassic World Lost whatever not being that great.
No, it wasn't.
Just
that's a Patreon episode for me. That's on my list.
I actually still haven't seen that one.
Okay, so you probably.
But I think the story had to change so much that they just couldn't get on board with the new vision or new direction. And it sucks. We live in the darkest timeline. Of course, we don't get to see the Carrie Fisher-centric movie. Of course, she had to be the focus of the last one,
Well, and too, it's going to this is, like you said, this is the darkest timeline. This is just the way things are. But not only is Carrie, we're not going to get more Carrie and more a Leia-centric movie, but we're not going to get kind of what Mark's upset about with his moments with Harrison and Carrie. We're not going to get any sort of Carrie moments other than some nice screen trickery, whatever they're going to do. But I feel like we're not going to get very many Carrie moments with other characters that we probably would have liked to see in that last movie. Something
totally
simple as
and
Carrie and 3PO, something that would happen every day in Star Wars. Leia and 3PO are pretty much, as we know, in the canon and the legends, always together, or 3PO's around doing something for her. That might not even happen in this movie. And that's hard to stomach.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing. That sucks. And I'm saying if Carrie had died at the beginning of shooting episode 8 instead of once it was basically done, they may have stopped, rewrote 8, and sort of changed course and kept Luke alive into 9. Man. But that's the unfortunate circumstances that we're facing.
That's too much. All that's too much. That's too much the darkest timeline for me. I think Luke should have died in the last movie simply just because it's the most dramatic move. But we'll see what they do. I can't say any of this till the last movie's out and done. I can look at it objectively and ask the question, Luke dying in this movie would have been more effective. It might not.
Yeah.
We might not be true after we see episode 9.
And it may not, or let me back up. It may be true that it would have been more effective in the movie we see compared to the movie that we don't get to see, because they had to change 9 so much. Right. The next quote, I got one movie. They totally hornswoggled me.
What a great quote.
Dude, come on. You're in 3 more Star Wars movies than you expected, and one was about you. You're just not the star of 3 movies anymore like you were the first go-round.
That's true.
And that's something I'm going to be building on, later.
So
Excuse me.
kind of like Obi-Wan with the prequels and Obi-Wan in the original trilogy.
I mean, you could say that if those movies came out in that order,
Right.
But
just for example's sake, I mean, that's what happens with those movies. If you look at them on paper, once again, a huge misstep of the prequels is that Obi-Wan was less of a main character than he was at times. Same with Anakin, but that's the way of things. So,
yeah.
But obviously, Obi-Wan was a main character in all three, and then he became a prominent side character in three of them. And of course, New Hope is Obi-Wan's movie of the original trilogy, if you want to call it that. Like if Obi-Wan had a movie of the original trilogy, it would be New Hope. So maybe that's The Last Jedi for Obi-Wan, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the last quote is the last line. Why mess with it? It's not something that worries me because it's all about the new generation. And this is where I just want to say, yes, it is about the new generation, and Disney knows that. It sucks for Mark that Luke isn't the hero anymore. But there was really no way that the decision was going to be made to keep the original trilogy heroes as the focal point of the sequels. And in a few minutes, I'll go into reasons why. I had an explanation, but John Hoey of the Resistance broadcast, who will be sharing the celebration stage with us that Saturday, tweeted something that was a better analogy than I'd come up with. He said, and I just copied this from Twitter, in my humblest of opinions, if the sequel trilogy just had Luke, Han, and Leia together being our main heroes, it would have been like an iconic band touring on a greatest hits tribute. But instead, our favorite iconic band has written 2 kick-ass new records and is still relevant. And I think that is the key for the future of Star Wars.
Okay. So he's saying the role they play in the movie is not only poignant enough, but also important enough without overstepping and being kind of tried and repetitive, or
I think he's saying that Star Wars is the band in this case, not Han, Luke, and Leia. So the band has been relevant and making awesome records this whole time, making awesome new things. Not like, not like 3/4 of the bands like our parents listen to that they're so old and don't have any original members anymore and they just play greatest hits every now and then, because that's sort of what, when I'm saying things would be fan service, that's what I'm talking about. If they were the focal heroes of the sequel trilogy, it would have just been, remember these guys, they're great and they're on a new adventure. Instead, we get 3 or 4, if you count Kylo in that, new heroes that are just as great going on new. Well, he's not a hero, but
yeah,
that's another episode.
It is coming. It's coming soon.
But yeah, so I felt like John's
I like that.
Tweet was a better analogy than anything I'd come up with. So yes, I feel bad for Mark that it sucks for him personally that he's not the man anymore. But Star Wars and the story overall are better for it. What do you think?
Is Star Wars better for it? Probably. But I this is where this gets interesting, Mike. We talked about this a lot. Either you don't have to love everything, right? You don't have to love everything in Star Wars. You don't have to love the direction, but the direction's happening, right? It's going. So the question is could you have Mark's stance, basically be excited about the direction and the new generation, but be kind of upset about some parts about Luke, Han, and Leia or something like that, or Luke. Yeah, I think so. But and that's kind of a middle ground. That's kind of a nuanced position, and you can't really.
You keep saying that, and I don't think it is nuanced. I think it's a cop out.
No, I think it is nuanced because I think today people want you to say, "Well, The Last Jedi was bad. The Last Jedi made these changes in the Star Wars story in Luke that I hated. This, that, and that's it." Or I'm a Disney shill. I'm a sequelist shill, like some people act, And
Hey, okay, I
See what
guess
I'm
if you
saying?
put those labels on it, it's more
well,
nuanced. Okay,
those are the labels I'm using because those are the labels the internet's using. Those are the labels that
and
those
you're
are
right.
parties.
You're right.
Those are parties on this in this battle, and I'm saying I'm neither of those by any stretch of the imagination. And the true irony of all that is, you bring in all those discussions, and then you ask people like how they acted when the prequels came out, and you got a whole nother thing. And some of those people have changed their tunes dramatically, and I think that bothers me almost more than this stuff, because as someone who enjoys the prequels, and there's just all this stuff we've talked about, like, you can't change your tune now out of nowhere because you don't like The Last Jedi. You can't change your tune on the prequels this second, you know what I mean? As like a spite method, that sort of thing. So that's been part of it for me too.
Yeah.
It's very, that's where I say the nuance is gone. The nuance to me is saying, well, if it's all Star Wars, to me, I kind of love it all because I'm a Star Wars fanatic, as we talked about on the show, and it's part of me and it's part of my life and my childhood, everything. But also at the same time, do I love all Star Wars the same? Do I love all decisions they made for the story the same? Do I? Not really, but am I always going to be excited for the next part of the ride? Yes. Does that make sense? Like, we're reading a book right now called Children of the Jedi that is painful, Mike. You know what I mean?
Yes, I
but it
agree
is more
with
Star
you.
Wars, and it was an artist's take on Star Wars. You know what I mean? And that is a thing.
And I guess I'm saying that you can still be a Star Wars fanatic, and accept that some things aren't for you.
That's
maybe
me,
like my opinion of the prequels has changed as I've gotten older. I know they're bad movies, but there's parts of them I like still.
They're worse movies,
and I know
because
that
they're Star Wars, though, and that's something that kind of bothers
no,
me.
they're just bad movies, is what I'm willing to say. But I also know there's parts of Star Wars now that aren't really for me. Like we've talked about, I kind of fell off of watching Star Wars Resistance.
Right.
It sounds like, based on how this season is wrapping up, I need to get back on it, and especially
Same.
since Christopher Sean followed this. Thanks, Kaz. But it's okay for it not to be all for me. That just because it's not all for me doesn't mean I'm taking the internet attitude of they're not pandering to me or catering to me anymore, so I hate everything now.
Right.
And so often
bothers me.
that anti-Last Jedi sentiment is that type of person.
Yes. Yeah.
They're
also the people that hated the prequels up until last year, and they trashed the prequels online. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm just it's outrage. This is an outrage. Like, this sake to be outraged. You know what I mean? And the real question lies in is like the decisions they made for Luke. Do they work out with Luke's story? Like, whether or not you agree with them or not. That's kind of where I'm at. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree, and that leads really well into the next thing I wanted to talk about.
So
I wanted to break this thing down. I wanted to break this thing down from 3 different angles, and the first one is just the narrative of the sequel trilogy. So, if the sequel trilogy was truly going to star the big 3, Han, Luke, and Leia, the story would well. Maybe that's what some people wanted, but I'm saying if it was going to, the story would be so fundamentally different. We really can't talk specifics about it or compare it to the movies we got. It essentially would have been a random EU or Legends trilogy out of nowhere. And some people, a vocal minority on the internet, would have been fine with that.
Yeah, I would have been fine with that. Fine with that if you're using that language. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you would have. How do I want to say this? You'd be like, okay, neat, new Star Wars starring Harrison, Mark, and Carrie. Right. They did a half-assed version of the Thrawn trilogy, but it's new movie, so I like it.
For the sake of Devil's Advocate, yeah, possibly. But what more important to me, Mike, is...
and they could have done it very well. We don't know what that movie looks like, but let's say they executed it well.
This is a really hard discussion to have without
and that's why I was saying it would be so fundamentally different.
Well, this is a really hard discussion to have without Star Wars Episode 9 coming out, because if 9 does not... Here's the problem. If 9 does not finish the Skywalker story, that's all I care about. and that's the problem. If they don't do that, that's the problem. If they do that and they chose this direction, their story, these characters, and they finish that, that's correct. I think it's just their take on it.
I want to probe you on that one. Yeah, probe. But I think we need to save that one for a different episode just to see exactly what you mean by finish the Skywalker story, because that could take so many different forms
they
right
keep
now.
hinging on that. That's all and they keep saying they keep saying that after these 9 movies, that's it for this story, and we're going to move to a different period of Star Wars or a different take on Star Wars, which I'm very into. So you have to end that Skywalker story at least in a decent way. And I'm not saying I'm not saying X or Y. I'm saying finish the story. That's all I'm saying.
And the way the story finishes is Chewbacca literally eating Kylo Ren. And that's the end of the Skywalker line.
Okay.
Now, like I said, those movies don't exist. We can't make direct comparisons, but we've had a few years of this is what should have happened online. There's a few plot points I want to address and just kind of get your take on them, because I've got mine. So these are things that have just been around. People have made YouTube videos about them or Twitter posts or whatever. Plot points from the movies we did get, but changes that people wanted to make. So, for example, a lot of people say, well, Rey should have been Luke's daughter. To me, that's looking less and less likely, but that also falls into the old expanded universe or Legends trap of making Star Wars smaller and more exclusive. And to me, one of the major points of the sequel trilogy so far is that anyone can be a hero.
Yeah, no, I like that too. I just want to know Rey's story, which I think we will get in the last movie.
And we probably will.
If we don't get Rey's story and she's just some sort of Force anomaly that we never found out where that's kind of lackluster storytelling.
Well, no, let's back up. What if we have gotten her story? Her parents were drunk junk traders on Jakku that sold her for drinking money, and she happened to be born strong in the Force, just like happened to children in the days of the Old Republic. Yeah. Their parents didn't have to be Jedi. What if we've already gotten her story? Does that make it worse to you?
No, I don't think that story is bad. I just want some sort of tie to the greater narrative of either Luke or Leia or Han or Kylo or something, where it just brings it all full circle, or Anakin, or whatever you want to do. Like, Rey can't just be this character that just popped for just character's sake. I don't care about her power level, but just like a character just appearing and then playing her role in a story and it never being fully tied in to the greater story.
But why can't she be? Why does she have to be tied into that?
I don't think she has to be tied into one of the characters via blood or anything like that. I think it's kind of a tenet of Star Wars, and maybe they'll break it for this. You know what I mean? Maybe.
And personally, I think they should, because, like I said, it's for everybody. The Skywalkers have had their time.
I know you,
but it's not like they rule the galaxy or anything.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And you said this a lot, but what I'm saying is, like, even if she has nothing to tie her to any of the main characters or the prequels or this original trilogy, that's fine. But she has to do something in the story, or she has to make something happen in one of these other characters like Kylo or something that brings it full circle, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't want her just to be like a plot device.
Okay, and that I can get on board with. What if the form of her doing that is her killing Kylo and ending the Skywalker story?
That might happen. Yeah, that might happen. But it's the conversations they have on the path there, or the things she does with the other good guys. You know what I mean? There's decisions she's going to make that are going to tie her, in theory, to more of the story, of course.
Episode 9 is going to come out and make us look like such idiots. So we're going to revisit this. What were we thinking?
So
the next plot point I want to talk about is the scene at the end of The Force Awakens. Finn and Rey are fighting Kylo in the forest on Starkiller Base. And people say it should have been Luke who called the lightsaber to him in that forest, not Rey. I think even Mark said he thought that should have been him. And my
I think he said it
response
as
to
a
that
joke,
is,
but yeah, he did say that a couple times.
well, I couldn't remember the context of it, but either way, if you wanted one new Star Wars movie instead of three, sure, that's probably what should have happened. But if that had happened, do you think there's any way that Luke doesn't just destroy Kylo Ren right there, based on what we've learned? Because like, oh hey, I'm actually here. I'm not a Force projection. I'm just gonna kill you because and like do my best to end the First Order here because I've already learned all these lessons off screen that you're not going to see in another movie. And so I feel like if Luke had been there at the end of The Force Awakens calling the lightsaber to himself, we would have ended the story way early. You know.
Yeah.
To me, that's one of the sillier ones I've seen.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I don't really care about that. The only thing I care about when it comes to the lightsaber is like why, you know, and this could be another cop-out thing, Mike, I guess, but like why does it have a connection to Rey? I want to know why. Is it because she's so purely good and it's a lightsaber, or is it something having to do with Anakin or Luke? That would be more interesting to me. I don't know how.
And we don't. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that because we don't have an answer to it. I want to know that too, like why it called to her and gave her that Force vision in Maz's castle.
If they don't answer that question or nothing happens with it, I would have preferred it just to be a plain like run-of-the-mill green lightsaber or something.
And you know, with Colin Trevorrow directing it, we may not have gotten that answer. But now that JJ's back, I think we will get some sort of resolution there. Another plot point. This one's not super related to Luke, but I feel like it's important to put out there. People say, oh, Kylo shouldn't be held accountable for using Starkiller Base to blow up 5 planets. He didn't really want to do it. Those are all Reylos who think that Kylo Ren should be redeemed, and they're wrong because he's still complicit in the destruction of 5 planets, and he should be held just as guilty as General Hux.
Okay.
Moving on to the next point.
Michael, just slide those in.
A lot of people have said that like they thought Luke should have been married. Like I remember when Force Awakens came out, people thought, oh, there's a gravestone there by him, like he's buried his wife or something.
Well, be consistent with the Last Jedi Luke, if that was true.
Explain that.
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to go into a thesis on this, but I just think.
Well, no, I just don't quite understand the connection.
I don't know how, you know, the wife would be there on the planet. That doesn't quite make sense. But I think Luke losing a family in an effective way would just add more to the Luke we saw in The Last Jedi. That's all I'm saying.
Did he not lose family in an effective way in The Last Jedi? It just happened to be a nephew instead of his wife?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just mean like if he had... You know, if he had a wife, it would be a whole other thing, and we'll get into that in Legends.
So you think like if he had a wife and then Kylo had killed her, then he would have gone on a full like Taken revenge tour?
It's kind of like in the prequels where they retcon in a way by doing Clone Wars and adding Ahsoka into the ethos of Anakin's mind, and Anakin's lost his mother, he's lost his wife, and now he's lost Ahsoka, which was kind of a canonical thing now, but it was kind of a post-retcon thing. It only adds to the Anakin what we see later. That's all I'm saying. Like
that's fair.
It's that sort of thing.
And for me, the people saying Luke should have been married, that's not a deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
But as our regular episodes are, as we're learning in those episodes, it would have made Luke in canon a fundamentally different person than who we saw in The Last Jedi. And I just want to add to that Mara Jade wasn't that cool, people. Yeah, she's a bad guy that turned good because she liked Luke. Whatever. It's not a hot take. She wasn't that cool.
Mara Jade's pretty cool. I don't know what you're talking about.
She was cool 20 years ago.
She's cool because she's a balancing act for Luke, but we'll get more into that later. Like she is not her personality is the opposite of Luke's in the best way possible. Like they balance each other out. You know. It's good. So
yeah. That's not the end of that conversation for sure. The next point I've seen addressed online, Luke was a coward for hiding on Ahch-To, and he shouldn't have done that. He should have done literally anything else. And to that I say, coward is maybe a strong word, but what he did is definitely the choice of an imperfect character. An imperfect character in a nuanced movie? That sounds great.
Yeah, and I think people's gripes on this, Mike, is maybe comparing it to Yoda and Obi-Wan, because obviously that's going to be the parallel they draw. And Obi-Wan and Yoda failed, but they were hiding, waiting, essentially. Luke essentially just said, I'm done. And that's the difference, I suppose, for people.
I can see
and drawing that parallel makes it more stark, because it happened before with his two masters, but they were like, we have a new hope, we have Luke and Leia coming down, you know what I mean, we have all this, we just have to lie in wait and be patient and watch over them, like the Journals of Ben Kenobi we've been reading, the Marvel canon. It's just different, and Luke kind of just gave up. That's Mark's take on it.
I don't know that he gave up. I think it's adding the layer of, you know, we were defeated or whatever, like you said, and we were wrong. That's the extra layer. Like, he saw the same failure in those two. He's like, we're wrong. We should just end this thing. Anyway, it's a flawed character that makes for a more interesting movie. Imagine that. Right. The next complaint, I really do love this one. Instead of force projecting himself across the galaxy, Luke should have gone to Crate and defeated the First Order with his laser sword. And you know, to that I say, sure. Think about what we said with Kylo not surviving the fight with Luke on Starkiller Base. This would change The Last Jedi. It would leave it with zero nuance. I would watch this, however, if Michael Bay was directing this scene, like Michael Bay from early 2000s, because you just see some guy jumping around everywhere, cutting AT-ATs and ATM-6s or whatever off at the knees.
The better question here, Mike, is how do you feel about Luke just going there instead of force projecting and dying exactly the same way, everything?
That's a great question. So I honestly... I can tell you specifically what scene I thought we were seeing him go there. Yeah, when I think it's that way for a lot of people. The skim speeders are out, and you see the shadow of a starship that blew up 3 times in one shot. I was like, oh, Luke's here in his X-wing. Oh, it's the Falcon. I thought Luke was flying in then, and we would see him basically do everything the same way. The fact that he's able to project himself across the galaxy, even cooler.
Oh, it's super cool. I just feel like people's contention is, I think this is what people want, and this is thoughts I've had too. Luke projects himself and lives or almost dies from all that power, or dies, or Luke goes there, makes all the same actions he did last time. You know what I mean? Doesn't raise a fist against anybody, doesn't hurt anybody, and dies from Kylo Ren. Yeah, the Mark isms. Would it be as effective, less effective, more effective if he physically went there and did everything exactly the same? I think maybe it would. So that's where it gets interesting.
That's a great question, and to me, it would make the actions less effective because it would show he was actually able to be defeated by Kylo Ren. Like the version we got, you know, he's punking Kylo. He chose to go out to save everybody. Kylo had no shot. And I think honestly, if Luke had been there in person, you know, we wouldn't have had that iconic scene of him staring down the First Order with a laser sword, but it would have been the result of, if Luke had shown up at the end of The Force Awakens, Kylo would have had no shot because Luke would have just ended him.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It would have been like
it
would have been like Obi-Wan fighting Maul at the end of Star Wars Rebels.
Well, I'm saying it's more like he does the Obi-Wan thing there. He just lets Kylo strike him down after keeping him distracted for a while, exactly like the movie. Because Luke dies the same either way. He dies. He becomes one with the Force either way.
And you are right. The end result is the same. But to me, that's bad storytelling because we've already seen that.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I just feel like a lot of people feel punked because Luke basically being like, "Hey, I just instant transmissioned here in a way, like I projected myself, and I tricked you. Peace out." And then Luke dies on Octu. You know what I mean? I feel like that's punking the audience to some people. So I think it's worth mentioning.
Well,
I think it's worth mentioning.
You could be right, but it's also true that the audience is a bunch of punks that need to be punked in some cases.
Yeah, I just think it's. I mean, I love the way Luke goes out. It's the most Jedi death we've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
I'm not. I don't know. The choice of making him being like, "Hey, I'm actually fine. I'm on another planet. Oh wait, I'm actually dead now." It's narratively confusing. I think it just. I don't know. With the Force power we've never
Interesting.
seen.
Honestly, that's the first time anyone's put it in those words to me. I never thought it was confusing.
I mean, I don't think it's confusing when it's happened. When it's happening, you're like, oh, he made it out. He's fine. And you're like, oh, he's dying now. But it's like that shift that happens for people. You know what I mean? As opposed to him showing up and getting struck down exactly like Obi-Wan and going straight to the Force. And you'd be like, well.
But that's boring. We've already seen it.
He bought them time. I'm not saying that. I'm just like devil's advocate here. It's something that's happened. It's like the twist was not that he punked Kylo. The twist was that he punked Kylo with the twist, and then he died from the twist he pulled.
So M. Night Shyamalan actually directed the end of this movie.
Possibly. It's the most Jedi thing ever. I love it for that way. But you know, I think I would have preferred Luke to die in the last movie too, because it just would be the best passing of the torch ever. Like if he died right before Rey finishes everything, you know, that sort of thing.
And I can't really disagree with you because we haven't seen 9,
Right.
But we live in the worst timeline in an awful world. You don't always get the ending or the passing of the torch you want. So the last point narratively I want to talk about is people just like Mark that say Luke shouldn't have died to this point. And this one's sort of more open-ended than the others we've mentioned because we haven't seen 9. But, you know, if you were trying to establish the accidental legend that he became at the end of episode 9, or episode 8, excuse me, you know, that accidental legend of him actually really facing down the First Order with a laser sword, you know, you need that to have the last 5 minutes of the movie that help people across the galaxy realize that they can too be heroes, you know. Him actually becoming the legend that he was sick of and disregarded the first, you know, 90% of the movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like that one could totally change based on what we see in episode 9.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens with that. We'll see. Now that we've been the script has been rewritten on like what Force ghosts can do to the physical world, as we saw Yoda in The Last Jedi affect the physical world with lightning, things like that. Like, who knows? Who knows how Luke's going to affect the physical world? It would be pretty amazing if they held Luke back, Mike, till the very end of the movie, in some way. If they held his screen.
Ooh, I hadn't thought about
to
that.
the end, and it's that pivotal moment with Kylo and Rey, whatever that ends up being, plus other elements in the story, and Luke appears at that moment. That's when it truly. Also, Mike, I'm gonna get on your nerves here a little bit too, but also bring this full circle. Star Wars, like, could the combined forces of Leia dying, obviously, which is going to happen in the last movie, I think. Rey's just inherent goodness, White Knight Rey sort of thing, and Luke Force Ghost combined. Could those elements, if done in the story well, combine to redeem Kylo Ren for you? Because
I
those are the
certainly
tenets.
hope not.
Those are the tenets, though, right? Leia, Luke, and Rey. Those are things that could convert.
If we're going to go that all in on it, though, let's get all the Force ghosts. Let's get Obi-Wan and Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn all in on this converting one, you know, troubled, barely teenager. He's an adult. who should have known better to stop being such a galactic dickhead.
Well, I agree with you in the sense of the power of it or whatever, but like I don't think they have narrative connection to Kylo like Luke, Leia, and Rey do. And maybe, like what I've said 1,000 times on the show now, this is when Anakin shows up, Kylo's, guardian.
Oh yeah,
guardian
that's
angel,
who I forgot
guardian
to mention.
angel.
Duh.
Yeah,
I was like, I forgot to say somebody.
we've said it a lot, but yeah, Kylo's perceived guardian angel or demon that he prays to. What if Anakin actually shows up and is like, "Hey man, listen to these people." That's it in a very simple way to say it, but like
I get what you're saying. And I'll put it this way: I have yet to hear a good reason or good narrative device.
What about Zach's
for Kylo to be redeemed?
What about Zach's thing? That was pretty good.
His was. Didn't he say something about Kylo and Rey having a kid? That was dumb. That's not going to happen.
It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. If it did happen, that would be a narrative device that could actually make the.
I am willing
easier.
to bet large sums of money that Kylo and Rey do not have a kid in Episode 9.
I don't think it's so much about what's going to happen or what we think.
And this is not
what
me
can
like
convert
hating
him.
on Zach. I love Zach. I just don't agree with his stance on this.
That could convert
like,
though,
I've
right?
not-
If that did happen, that's whole nother conversation.
Why would it happen though? Rey deserves better than Kylo, and he deserves much less than Rey.
We got to get some Reylo experts on. We don't know enough about this. Like, we need to get some. I'm just saying that people have done their literature now with these books out, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi books. There's a lot more evidence to support the Ben-demption and some Reylo.
No, there's not. Really, though, just to reiterate my point, I have not heard what I think is a convincing or narratively interesting argument for redeeming Ben Solo.
Okay. So you don't think
I'm
the
not
things
saying
I
it
just
doesn't
listed,
exist.
Anakin, Luke, Leia, Rey, in some form of all those characters interacting with Kylo throughout the movie, or at some point in the movie, couldn't see that swaying him, or that working. And guess what that would do? Mike? That would tie the whole Skywalker circle together.
And I could potentially see that happening, and that will make Episode 9 my least favorite of the sequel trilogy because it's something we've seen already.
That's true, but what if they did it a different way? Because the themes of Star Wars are hope and redemption, so like and relationships between parents and their children. So it's like those are always been at least George's themes. I don't know if they're going to go that route.
Like I'm saying, there's a way it could be done. Yeah. I don't know what that way is, but I'm not like hell bent on hating it. Okay. But based on what you just described, I've already seen that movie. I don't need it.
You've seen Return of the Jedi.
Show me actually just wiping out the villain,
Wow.
Because no, you actually are a blight on the galaxy. Let's go ahead and throw you into the sun.
Okay. Well, Mike's gonna listen to this episode after Episode 9 comes out.
Jesse says, as if I listen to any of our episodes.
You're gonna listen to this one.
So that was just one perspective that I wanted to talk about. So we'll probably move through these other two a good deal faster than the narrative one. But I also want to talk about Mark's opinion and his stance through just the world that we live in.
Okay.
So I'm gonna get on the soapbox for a little bit.
Oh, no.
Not too long. So just in general, America, the world, moviegoers, whatever, are not the same as they were in the late 70s or the early 2000s when the other trilogies came out. We're increasingly diverse and we expect more from our movies. Clearly, a trilogy that was centered on 3 white people in their late 60s or early 70s would have ended up a flop. And I'm, again, willing to put large sums of money on that.
Yeah.
There would be hardcore fans like us. Like I in our notes here, I put hardcore fans of a certain age group. We're in that age group, just barely.
Oh, we are.
Hardcore fans of a certain age group or demographic would see those movies and ensure that they were technically profitable. But there's no way in hell that the 2 movies released so far would be in the top 10 of box office all time. At best, the movies would be regarded as relics of a time gone by, or as John from Resistance Broadcast said, a band doing a greatest hits tour. And at worst, maybe even considered regressive. Disney knew that expanding their audience was necessary, and therefore, the new core of our heroes of the sequel trilogy came into existence. And this plays directly into the next angle I want to look at. But do you? I'm sure you have some response to what I just said.
Not really. We've talked about this before, Mike. The true misstep is them not doing the sequel trilogy earlier if they really wanted to do Han, Luke, and Leia. So,
well, that I am on board that train,
right after,
sir.
Even if it was right after the prequels or the same time as the prequels or whatever, we'd have a whole nother discussion that we're having right now. So, yeah, 60s and 70s alone, just characters in the 60s and 70s. Carrie even said this, like she was thrilled to come back to work because she said, what role do women in Hollywood have post their 50s?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're totally right. And
no one wants to see that, is what she's saying. And that's sad.
Yeah.
That's sad. But she's like, she was listing off, of course, the Oscar winning, actresses out there, the 5 of them, you know what I mean, that are out there. And she's like, that's it. That's it. That's kind of, and I think it would be the same even with Mark and Harrison, right? It still would be the same thing. And if you want to talk about just, the way the world is, or just movies in general, it's not going to fly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I agree completely with what you said. And maybe if
Carrie's not Meryl
when the
Streep,
prequels came out,
she's not Meryl Streep or Glenn Close. Or
that's right.
Somebody.
If the prequels didn't come out when we were in the early age of the internet and social media, which basically led George to be like, why would I keep making movies if people are such dicks all the time? They would have been very different. Again, we live in the darkest timeline and all that. But I don't know that anybody could convince me or present a convincing argument that if made starting in 2015, when Disney acquired Lucasfilm, 3 movies starring Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford would be as successful as the new movies have been so far. They would have made money, but definitely Force Awakens wouldn't have given Avatar a run for its money. People trolls try to talk about Last Jedi being a flop. It's not. It's still in the top 10 all time, in box office. So I don't think any of that would have happened if we didn't. I say that like I work there. If Disney did not take these steps to expand the scope of the story and the audience.
Okay. So the next part you want to go into this, Mike, obviously, is just making money, right? Disney making money. Let's be real about
it's
this.
not necessarily the part I want to go to.
But it's real.
But this is what it all boils down to. It's big business, baby. Disney spent more than $4 billion to acquire Star Wars, and they had no guarantees that the films so far, besides Solo, would be as successful as they have been. Solo
was pretty successful.
I think technically made money in the worldwide box office, but you can call it a flop. Disney knew that their long-term targets are not adult existing fans like you and me or people of a generation ahead of us or two. It's kids who have a whole new era of Star Wars to grow up with. Yeah. And since Disney bought Lucasfilm, they've gotten Rebels, they've gotten Resistance, they've gotten 4 movies, they've gotten the series The Freemaker Adventures, which is a Lego series, which is way funnier than it has any right to be.
All those are,
Galaxy of Adventure, the YouTube series now, etc. Disney has done a fantastic job of not pandering, because that's disrespectful, of knowing who their next audience is.
Well, let's not forget to mention too, the part I'm most excited about is I think this is a way of Disney acknowledging our group, Mike, and maybe older, but Disney doing the live action shows that seem to be a little bit more niche, more on the fringes.
You're right.
Fringes
I
of
hadn't
Star
even
Wars.
considered those shows when I put this episode together, but you're
Like
right.
shows
We could
potentially not about the
see
Force or the Rebels and the Empire, or what I always say are the big things in Star Wars, right? The conflict, the Force, the heroes. Shows that might not involve any of that potentially. Maybe more fan service, as we want to call it that, but in a positive way, because they're going to be telling new stories. So it really won't be that fan servicey. It might be fan servicey in the way of, well, this is a show about Mandalorians, which has always been a fan service, but it's a show taking new risks or doing new things in Star Wars. Doesn't involve the Force, whatever it is. Disney shocked me finally doing that, because we've been hearing about the Star Wars show since Revenge of the Sith, from Rick McCallum himself.
It's true.
Rick McCallum used to talk about the Star Wars
good
show.
old Rick.
I love him. So it's finally here, 15 years later, and it's because of Disney. So I've got to give credit there.
And you are absolutely right. I did not even consider the upcoming shows on the Disney streaming service when I put this episode together. So they're not even ignoring the old fans with that.
Right.
That's great. My next point was just that 3 old white people, no matter how iconic their characters are to your parents, have a limited appeal at best to the new target audience. Kids or young adults today, they need to see themselves reflected in this universe if they're going to commit dollars and time to being longtime fans. Now, here is where I insert my disclaimer. I am not trying to make Disney out as some progressive, inclusive company. They're not. They're a money-making company that's made a lot of bad decisions, and they're kind of a-holes. They do a lot of things wrong, and the primary reason they're targeting this expanded group is to make more money, not because it's the right thing to do. That said, it doesn't really hurt the fandom that we're expanding to target these new people too.
Okay. I think you see what you're saying.
So even though it looks like they're sort of doing the right thing by expanding the audience, the main reason they're doing it is the bottom line.
Yeah.
Because the people that work at Disney aren't stupid. They know how to make money.
Yeah, they've been making money a long time. And, of course, we didn't even mention it. We've mentioned it a bunch of times on the show. Let's not forget Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, or the vernacular people using Star Wars Land.
And that's my next point, because kids today will literally be able to grow up in the world of Star Wars if they live in Los Angeles, Anaheim, or Orlando. I can't wait to go to Galaxy's Edge, but
I know.
This
we're past the demographic.
Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire Outpost, Batuu, whatever you want to call it. This land would not have the widespread appeal if we did not have a new set of heroes to latch onto. I truly believe that if they tried to make Star Wars Land off of adventures we continued to have with old Han, Luke, and Leia, I don't think it would have been nearly as successful as we all know it's going to be. And I'll tell you, they announced today that the Galaxy's Edge panel at Celebration is on Saturday, the same day that we're supposed to be on stage. And I'm like, I don't want to miss that. Please don't be at 2 p.m.
Yeah, just for our sake alone, not only our enjoyment,
right.
but oh man, it's
also people who might come see us.
Yeah, people might come see us, might skip us for that. That's how it is. That's how it is.
I have a hard time blaming them too. Excuse me.
So do you have any other thoughts?
Okay, so
Mike?
those were
that's a lot of thoughts.
It is, and those were the 3 perspectives I wanted to look at. So let's go back to the original question here. What is the problem with Mark Hamill? Pause for dramatic effect.
Pause.
The problem with Mark Hamill is he's a fan. In many ways, he's just as big a fan as all of us. Right. That's why we love him, and we connect so well with him. It helps make Mark who he is, and it really helps make Luke who he is. But as fans of the past few generations are finding out, Star Wars does not belong to him or us. I can put us in that category. And sometimes letting go of something you never really had can be difficult. You add in a couple million Twitter followers and a clickbait-ready internet nerd culture, and everything Mark says is instantly blown out of proportion. So, to me, it seems like over the past year, he's started to come around with the realization that, like he said in that interview, everything's all about the new generation, as it should be. For the good and the bad, to expand the audience, to expand the love of Star Wars, but it's also because Disney's not idiots. They know the best way for them to expand the audience to keep making that money.
Okay. And Ryan was the sole writer.
And that is my 3 perspective discussion on Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker and Disney and money and The Last Jedi. And I hope you still listen to our regular show after that. Jesse's like, Mike, you just killed our following. I don't think I did. I don't think I said anything too outlandish or, if you just stop and think that it's all about money. Oh yeah, that's kind of where this all came from.
That kind of makes it sadder in some ways, though.
And it might be because of that, but I think the movies we've gotten so far are better because of their decisions to make more money in the long term, as twisted and awful as that sounds.
It is pretty twisted and awful. But that aside, Star Wars is going to continue, Mike, and we're going to get more Star Wars stuff. You know what I mean? The question I always ask people when they vent and rant about things like this is, well, did you just not want no more Star Wars? Did you just want like books and that's it, but no more films? You know what I mean? Like, it's a good question to ask people.
And there's a lot of people who'll say yes to that.
That's crazy.
Because that takes them back to a time when they felt they had ownership over it.
Right. Well, and there's a spiritual connection more than the movies when you grow up reading the books too, but it's obviously we're going through the show rereading books and reading new books. So we're getting more tied in than we've ever been, but I don't know. More Star Wars is always good to me, even if I don't like it. That's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to like it all. That's fine. I don't like Resistance. The Last Jedi still doesn't set well with me as a movie, despite its
I don't think you've ever said it that negatively before. That it doesn't sit well with you. You need to watch it again because you're wrong. It's the best of them.
Well, shave off 20 minutes and I might have a different opinion, but as the movie stands right now, yeah.
I'm having trouble reconciling that statement with your defense of the prequels.
I mean, I think shave off 15 minutes from each one of those movies too, and they're better as well. That's just the way of things. Shave off 5 or 10 minutes from Return of the Jedi. It's probably better too. But New Hope and Empire.
It depends on which edition of special edition.
Yeah, I'm talking about canonical special edition.
If you put back in the original song and take out the Jedi Rocks BS, yes, I agree with you.
I saw a funny skit the other day, Mike, that this reminds me of. It was a skit on some comedy website, and it was a guy wearing all Star Wars stuff, and another guy walked by wearing a Star Wars shirt, and he was like, "Oh, you like Star Wars?" Talking to the guy sitting down wearing the hat, everything. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I love it." And they had this discussion, and they started talking about the new movies and the prequels and all this stuff. And of course, the conversation ends with the guy who was walking by saying, "Okay, let me get this right. You like New Hope and Empire and hate everything that's happened since. You don't like the Ewoks. You don't like the prequels. You don't like the direction of the new movies. You don't like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And the guy's like, "I guess so. Yeah, well, yeah." It's like, and he's like decked out in all Star Wars gear, and it's just a funny commentary on the world we live in. It's like people have been complaining since the Ewoks. You know what I mean? Like they have been screaming their heads off, being like, "Well, Star Wars was over for me then." It's like, well, then Star Wars might not need you, as you've said before, Mike, or maybe you're not into Star Wars. Maybe you just enjoyed those first 2 films, but you're not into Star Wars as an entire nebulous. Because guess what? I hate to say it, but Ewoks and Gungans are canonical. They're races in the Star Wars universe. Take it or leave it, and they were designed for kids. And if you don't like them, then you don't have to like all of Star Wars. That's fine. But like, you don't have to like just say, "Well, Star Wars ruined for me." You could just say, "Well, I enjoyed those first 2 films, and that was it." as movies, and that's an okay argument too.
It's true.
You don't have to be like, well, I love Star Wars. I wear a Star Wars hat and shirt every day, but I hate everything Ewoks onward, you know? And that's actually a lot of people's stance, which is really strange.
Because there's a lot of ding-dongs out there. So thank you so much for joining us in this off the schedule episode of the Canon Cantina, where you got to listen to me go off about Luke and The Last Jedi and sequel trilogy and all of that stuff. Yes. And Jesse doing his best to trip me up playing devil's advocate, but I actually agreed with a lot of the things he said. So sucker! Just a couple things. We're not going to read a review or anything tonight because I don't have those pasted in our notes right here. We'll do it next week. We do want to say thank you to our newest producer, Rob Roundy, who joined us on Patreon this week. You know, Rob, you sound like a super cool person. And if you have any arguments with what we have to say on the show, well, I'll just see you on Friday and you can tell me to my face. But thank you so much for joining us at the producer level.
That's our first producer.
Yeah, it goes a long way towards, helping us get to Celebration and helping us pay back a lot of the work we've put in to get to this point.
That's right. So that's patreon.com/the Canon Cantina. If you guys want to join our Patreon and get a behind the scenes look, get an additional podcast where we talk about things that are not Star Wars and kind of have discussions like this where Mike and I just kind of go. We're not looking at some sort of deep text or we have all these Luke Skywalker quotes or whatever. There's a whole other thing, right? That's the Patreon. So if you deem this show adds value or entertainment to your life, I've talked about before, consider contributing a couple bucks a month to us and help us pay those bills, help us get to Celebration, help us pay all these hosting and streaming fees, things like that. That's just the Canon Cantina Patreon, and that's all I have to say on that, Mike.
That's right. Jesse will be posting pictures of himself hitchhiking to Star Wars Celebration from Tulsa to Chicago. So help him do that more effectively by choosing to subscribe to our Patreon. All right, let's wrap this thing up. You can go to thecanoncantina.com for links to all of our social media, and you can actually listen to the show there as well. You can also find our show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, Podcast Addict, YouTube. We're also on Spotify. We're streaming live right now on Twitch, and you can find these recorded streams posted to YouTube later.
That's right, and that's twitch.tv/the Canon Cantina. If you're not following us there, please do. That helps us out a lot. It's also going to tell you when we go live with the show, so it's just a nice notification for you to have. And eventually, we're trying to build up our Twitch infrastructure, get better at Twitch, get better at streaming, and we're going to be streaming this
Twitch infrastructure.
Yeah, and I'm hoping Mike too, just to stream fun stuff at Celebration, not even necessarily the show, but just other things. Just go live on Instagram or Twitch. So follow us those places at the Canon Cantina. Help spread the word of our show by subscribing, rating, and reviewing. Continue leaving those Apple Podcast reviews for us. If you think we do something better on the show or just have an idea for a future show, send us an email at canoncantina@gmail.com. And join us next week as we return to Legends, because we had to talk about...
We promise we'll do it this time. I think we've teased it for like 3 weeks now, but we will go to Children of the Jedi next week.
This is the longest Legends break I think we've ever given Mike, and it's the fun time's over, Mike. Fun time's over for you. So you had your vacation, you had your joy. Now we got to take it back. So
it's true.
And I've mentioned this on the show, guys, but I'll mention it again. We're kind of, this is like the second act of Legends, and this is kind of considered the darkest act of Legends. Pretty much
we talked a lot about dark timelines
pretty
today.
Much synonymously with everyone, not only just literary writing wise, but also like continuity with Star Wars. It just makes the least amount of sense till we get to that third act when we start the New Jedi Order and the books that follow that. It kind of gets back in line. So interested to see where this goes. And when I say acts, I mean post Return of the Jedi acts of Legends. But we will return to Children of the Jedi, and we hope you guys join us next week. Thank you for everything. Thank you for just continuing to listen to this show and help us get to Star Wars Celebration. We couldn't do it without you.
Thanks for joining us here in the Canon Cantina, everybody. Cheers.
May the force be with you.
Ooh, talked a lot in that one. That might be the most I've ever talked in an episode.
I was going to say that. We have some people still on the stream as I'm shutting the stream down, but hopefully they got through that. And hope. I don't know what people left when you went on your break, but they had better things to do. They went and watched Ninja or something.
I'm sorry that happened, but Caitlin was like, I cannot carry this
She's
thing
like,
in.
this is literally impossible. Well, I'm going to stop the stream.
Yeah.
Thank you guys that are still watching on the stream. We appreciate it, and some gaming streams soon. Cheers.